Being a Christian, a lot of people just kind of assume you just believe things just to believe things. That you don't really have any reason to believe something. That's what they think that faith means, is that it means, belief without any kind of evidence. But in order to be a Christian, I have to first believe that there's a God. And I think that there's quite a lot of evidence that supports that there is a God. And then I would go even further to say that there's one specific God, and that one specific God has revealed himself through a number of ways. And I'm going to get there at some point to tell you about that. But right now, I just need to convince you that there is a being that is outside space and time. In order to be an atheist, somebody has to believe that nothing created everything, that order comes from chaos, that life comes from non-life, that consciousness comes from unconsciousness, and that morals come from amoral causes. That's what you have to believe to be an atheist. Even if you only believe one of those things, it's kind of silly. There's this belief that we have all throughout the world. It's called scientism. It's the belief that people have that science can solve all things. But if you ask any scientist, they can't tell you that they can, through scientific means, prove the mind. Science is done through the scientific method, meaning that you can do something through testing, and through consistent testing, you'll get the same result. But there's a number of things that we just don't understand. And so I would point to those things. I would point to the fact that scientifically impossible for nothing to create everything. I mean, it just is. If there is no thing, then it cannot create. I think it's scientifically impossible to show that chaos, an explosion of things all were working around and being random events, creates order. Where you have an orbit that's consistent. I don't think that you just get physics, the laws of physics, just accident. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. We have zero way to say that life comes from non-life. We have a bunch of people who go, well, we think that it's possible that all of a sudden this thing came into existence. Okay, can you prove that? No, we can't. Right. They can't prove that at all. You can't even remotely get there. They can't do it in a Large Hadron Collider. They can't do it. There's all these different things that we just can't do. We cannot create something from nothing. We know that we don't just create life from non-life. Our consciousness is weird. We don't really even quite, we can conceptualize it because we all have one, but it doesn't mean that you can sit there and organize all of these things, coherently through scientific means of explaining, well, the consciousness and blah, 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 doesn't work. So how does a rock, doesn't have consciousness, but I have consciousness? There's a tree, it's a living organism. From everything that we can tell, there's no such thing as consciousness in that tree. We don't even relatively understand the consciousness of so many different things. It's unbelievable. But yeah, no. If you're a scientism believer, then that's what you believe. You just believe that people developed over time randomly through some whatever process, and then all of a sudden they got consciousness. They became conscious somewhere along the way. But it's not like we can explain it, so that's fine. And then amoral causes, right? Yet we have morals. We have a value system. We know inherently that certain things are wrong. There's nothing that there are certain things that we can say it is wrong to do X thing always. Why? I mean, if we're all just matter in motion of, the result of random events through time, if all of us just had, some trilobite ancestor that ultimately only cared about reproduction of itself, why does it matter if something bad happens to somebody else and I benefit from it? I mean, we would say morally it would be wrong for me to walk into your home and steal all of your things. But why? From a scientism perspective, it doesn't make any sense because I own the resources now. It's good for me, therefore it's good, right? The whole, the whole species thing, right? Where you got to be stronger, this thing is superior. It's lasted longer. It's more robust. It's able to take from you. Therefore, it's able to reproduce. Therefore, survival of the fittest. That doesn't work for us anymore. Why? So why does that process suddenly change? Because we came together and decided, well, that's a bad process. Well, I mean, it worked for a long time. Why is it a bad process? Under scientism, you cannot justify any of these things. Now, a lot of people will say, you sound awfully arrogant. And I would say, maybe. That's not my point. That's not what I want to come off as. I'm just thinking out loud, like, how do these things happen? How is it that we can justify these things? So the whole point of these questions that I'm asking you, or this rambling I'm getting at, is this. We can prove that God exists by these questions. Like, in order for anything, for any of this to matter, or to make any sense, that is, there has to be something outside of space and time that puts it together. When I can look at your DNA and I can see a vast amount of information in it, I'm allowed to wonder, that's random? Or is that purposeful? Is that design specific? I'm allowed to look at things like the laws of logic, like the law of non-contradiction, and think, how is that justifiable without a creator putting it in place? All scientists agree that the universe has a beginning. That's what they say. It has a beginning. They describe it as the Big Bang. The Bible describes that as, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He spoke them into existence. Now, if you're outside of a computer and you create something in the computer, it's not weird for the computer to not be able to observe you or test you or to understand you, but somebody puts the rules into the programming to make it make sense. So when somebody asks me, well, doesn't that just sound like the God of the gaps? I say no. God is the necessary precondition for anything. He is the necessary precondition for all things. There's plenty of things like all things are contingent upon something. All things are, except for God. God is not contingent. You don't have a stop sign, and you just ran. Unbelievable. Anyways, God is not contingent on anything if he's outside of space and time. You and I, we're contingent. We need parents to make us, right? Fish are contingent upon water. We need atmosphere. In order for there to be this vehicle that I'm driving around in, there has to be an auto manufacturer. So we can prove that God exists. There can be a vast majority of indirect evidence that leads to something, but there can also be direct evidence that he's revealed himself in space and in time. So I guess you'll have to find out what that is when you come back for the next one.